Welcome to Fabula Celtica, a Celtic Studies podcast with Tyler Baxter.
And seers Sinead
Season 1, Ancient Ireland. Episode 13, The Good, the Bad, and the Poetry. I have no idea how much we need to be facing the microphones in here, Saoirse.
I don't know either. Hold on. I can put one on.
Oh,
it
that's
sounds
a good
okay.
idea. Okay.
It sounds alright. I do feel I feel like I sound like Skeletor just a little bit, and I won't elaborate why. But
We'll have Saoirse introduce herself in a minute, but the reason that we're talking like this is because Kevin wasn't available with his nice, very easy setup home studio today.
Boo.
So we decided we'll go ahead and try out UCC's, University College Cork's podcast studio that they have in their library. And so we're trying to figure out all the equipment. They've got this fancy, board with all the little, I don't even know what you call it.
We spent 40 minutes trying to figure it out, and it was like, how many Celticists does it take to figure out technology?
Yeah.
More than two.
Apparently,
two, I think.
which bodes poorly because there is a technology component to my PhD research. So
You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
So yeah, it'll be grand.
It'll be fine.
We figured it
It'll
out.
be fine.
If it only takes 40 minutes to get to the main, meat of the matter.
It sure looked like it's grand.
Yeah.
I wouldn't get too bogged down in it. It'll be all right.
Yeah. But let's go ahead and back up and help everyone understand what's going on here, because I've alluded to some things. There's a new voice on the podcast. So, Saoirse, you are joining me today, and thank you so much for coming. We've known each other for about a year now, I'd say. We met last summer.
Last summer, actually, at the Students Celtic Conference.
Yep.
And you had Tyler Baxter, UCC, and I was like, oh my God, I go to UCC. I've never seen you before. I know everyone in Cork. What do you mean?
And at that point, you were finishing your undergrad, correct?
Yes, I just finished my undergrad. So I decided to be a big shot and go to a conference and sit there and go, oh my God, other nerds. This is great.
And fair play to you for that. I mean, we had such a good time.
Yeah, oh my God. It was actually, highly recommend if there's anybody here that's studying this, go to as many conferences that you can, because I remember the first talk I was sitting there and I was crying because I was like, everybody else is a nerd. I can be slap my ass and call me a couple and people laugh. This is great. We've known each other for about a year. I feel like you are very much more the linguistic side and the literature analysis of Celtic studies, and I feel like I'm a bit more political, historical. So this would be really fun.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah,
I hope.
I think so. I think. I know so because
I know.
Things are always fun when you're around.
Stop it, Shane. Stop it.
But you're still in UCC, and you were finishing your undergrad last year. So what are you doing
now? Sorry. No, my favorite topic, me. So I'm doing a master's specialising in Celtic, specifically Irish slavery. I think I'm going to put it between 400 and 700. I want to do pre-Viking because I won't get into it. I'll talk about it another episode. It's a mess. There's
but truly early Irish law stage.
Very
pre-Norman.
Very
pre-Viking
pre-Norman.
even.
It's definitely there. There's definitely not that much research because academia loves being the poor people, we'll get to them in a while. And it's oh guys, there's people, there's so many people there.
We're going to be guilty of that again for this episode because we'll be looking at one of the Nevith class, one of the noble classes. Our last episode that I did solo was about kings, and so we're kind of going from the top of the hierarchy down, but we will be getting to lower class people, including slaves, soon enough, within another couple of episodes. And in fact, we're getting pretty close to where I was really hoping to get with this season that's kind of an overview of early medieval Ireland as a whole. And my news that's going to affect the podcast and that makes this so timely is that I have, God bless, been awarded PhD funding for the University of Edinburgh.
Woo! No one more deserving.
And we have fun sound effect buttons, so hopefully that actually worked. But I will now go ahead and say that in a slightly different way. I have been awarded PhD funding for the University of Edinburgh, which means I have to now do a PhD.
You'll be fine. You'll be totally up shit's creek. But you'll have so much fun.
I'll be a little more than a husk in the next 3 years. But for now, I'm delighted. Really, it's going to be hard to leave Cork after having been here for a solid 3 years and really having enjoyed it. But Edinburgh is a wonderful city. It is not that far away, so I will certainly be visiting, and hopefully...
Sorry, started like tearing up. Oh my god, sorry.
Yeah, no. Fortunately, we don't have ourselves... Well, fortunately or unfortunately, our beautiful faces are not being recorded, so at least, people won't be able to watch you sobbing your eyes out.
Yeah. Why are you leaving?
On the other hand, they can't see our beautiful faces, so that is a bit of a shame for them.
That's such a shame for them.
Yeah.
What a pair. That's all I'd say.
I guess in regards to the podcast, my PhD research specifically is going to be looking at Celtic revivalist adaptations of medieval narratives. And to be clear about what that is, the Celtic Revival or Celtic Revivals were this series of scholarly and literary and cultural movements that took place mostly in the 19th and early 20th centuries. There was a lot of renewed interest starting to come up in conjunction oftentimes with nationalist sentiments. So we see this in Wales, we see this in Ireland a little later, we see it in Scotland, and my research specifically will be looking at the period from about 1870 to 1930 in Ireland and Scotland, or in regards to Irish and Scottish writers specifically, whether or not they're actually in those locations. These really are the scholars who begin the discipline of Celtic studies, and how these people, both the scholars and more creative types like, say, W.B. Yeats, Augusta Gregory, even James Macpherson, though he's a little before my period in Scotland, how people like this retold these stories from medieval Ireland, and specifically I'll be looking at the Ulster Cycle tales and those adaptations. So my plan then for the podcast is, chances are there will be a bit of a pause as I'm getting my feet under me after moving to Edinburgh, dealing with all my visa stuff, getting the PhD going. But once I have my feet under me, the podcast will be returning with a new season about Celtic revivals.
Woo!
Today then, we're going to be looking at poets. This is not to be shilling for the elite classes, but I do love my poets.
I adore the poets. I think they're very, very fun because they were just... Can I curse?
Absolutely.
I've been cursing already, so
Yeah,
I hope
yeah.
so. They're just bitchy little guys.
Yes.
I always describe all of like the rank system in Irish society as pub culture. But
Yes.
like, because for people listening, if ye are from, like Ireland, Scotland, England, I'm pretty sure it's similar in the States. Like, if you go into a pub and there's a regular there, and you're talking to somebody, and then the regular comes up to you, and he's been there years, and he's like, yeah, just to let you know, he's class. He will always look out for you. He's really nice. You're going to be like, yeah, that guy's sound. And then if he goes up to you and he's like, yeah, he got into a massive fight, then shit himself, and then threw the shit at somebody, he's weird, stay away from him. You're going to be like, what a freak, boy, I'm going away from him. It's that kind of, your honour price and how people perceive you is so, so important. And the poets are not even the regular, they're the bartender. They decide like how people think of you. They decide if you get served, they decide if you get overcharged, they decide your status, basically.
Yes.
I think.
Yes, certainly they decide your social status, if not your legal one. I think that's certainly how they tend to be portrayed in the majority of the stories about them. They're like influencers almost, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh my, the OG influencers.
Yeah. Or celebrities, what their opinion is tends to influence the opinions of so many others within their societies. So they just have really credible cultural capital. So to give an idea, I suppose, of how these poets were perceived in early Irish society, we can look at some examples both from our law texts, which we had a whole episode about the basic idea of the Irish law texts, where they come from, what they involve, who may have written them, that sort of thing. But we can also, of course, look at the legendary literature, which is my personal favorite, and I think is the favorite of a lot of us in this area.
Well, you know, you're wrong, but okay. Legal tracks.
I do like when the two come together.
Oh yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah.
That's always
Yeah.
a nice little touch.
So there's so many stories of poets. One of my favorite groups of legendary literature are the handful of tales about that we have about a character called Mongan, and he's not very well known.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's a son of Manannán mac Lir.
Okay.
And there's a story that we'll go into another time about his conception that involves venomous sheep. Which, you know,
Okay.
it's really hard to top. There's lots of Monty Python-esque energy to the Mongan stories.
What was this guy doing? Okay,
Yeah,
venomous
yeah.
sheep. How?
but-
Doesn't matter. That's another episode.
Well, some of it may be this episode. We'll see.
We'll see.
Well, there's a particular story that involves Mongan, though he's kind of a minor character in it. He's more of a ominous background presence, really. But the tale is called How Mongan Was Deprived of Noble Issue.
Fucking Mongan. Sorry.
And
Sorry.
no worries at all. We just want to be having a good time. That's why we're here.
I don't know. Sorry. Mongan started off with venomous sheep,
Yep.
ominous background character. He was deprived of nobility.
Yeah. Moreover, when we say noble issue, we're talking about noble issue of his loins.
Lads. Stop the bus now.
Moreover, ominous background, Mongan is but a wee lad in this story, an adolescent perhaps. He's not like an adult, you know, somewhere in
This
that.
is why they kicked 14-years out to join the Fiannas, because they're doing shit like this.
Probably about that age. So the story involves the King of Ulster at this time, whose name is Fiachna. And Fiachna is Mongan's, I don't want to say foster father, because he's the guy who's married to Mongan's mother, and Mongan is the son of Fiachna's wife and Manannán mac Lir, the sea god.
Okay.
The whole thing behind that is so I guess stepfather.
Stepfather with no legal obligations, really.
Yeah, but there's also always the question in here of,
Well,
but is he going to play it off as I am the true father because he doesn't want
and
other
also
people
like
to
it's a
know
god
that-
as well.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean
Oh,
it's kind
God.
of it's similar, I'd say, to Cullen say, where his father might be Sultiv, but it might be Lugh, but it might be Conchover. But
Similar with my dad, yeah.
oh dear.
The postman, you know. Sorry, Dad. Sorry.
So, King Fiachna of Ulster, who we'll say, just to make things simple, is Mongan's kind of father, he invites a chief poet by the name of Echa Rigegus, to his court. And Echa is also an Ulsterman, so they have some sort of past relationship and rapport with each other. But Echa is initially hesitant to come for this visit because he has a bad feeling that he's going to have a falling out with Fiachna during this visit on account of Fiachna's son, Mongan.
Oh.
And this goes into something that comes up very frequently in these stories, where poets and druids as well often have this prophetic ability.
Yeah.
They're able to foresee the future to some extent, and prophecy in these tales frequently is inevitable, but it's also one of those cases of the letter of the prophecy being true, but not necessarily the spirit sometimes.
Ooh.
So it's possible that prophecies can be misinterpreted. But in any case, that seems to be what's implied here. It's not explicitly stated that he's prophesizing this, but for some reason, Echa is like, we're going to have a falling out because your son is going to get in the way of something.
Something,
Things are
yeah.
not going to go well.
It is always fun. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no.
I do love that aspect about poets, that everything is like, well, no matter what, they're right. Do you know the kind of like words can get twisted and there can be misunderstandings and sorry, I just went up with the stone thing, but I'm going to do that later.
I'm glad you said that, because this story is a bit of an unusual one in that a lot of what happens, it happens because this particular poet is wrong.
What?
Oh yes.
Oh.
Oh yes.
Ooh.
Oh yes. It's gonna get spicy.
Fun.
So
Sitting up in my seat.
specifically, Becc is worried. He tells Fiachna he's worried that Mongan is going to dishonor Becc by contradicting his great knowledge. One of the things that poets seem to have functioned as for the patron that they were attached to, which would normally be a king or a lord, was their walking library, their living library of Shenachus, of lore. They seem to be familiar with the early Irish legal system. They were familiar with traditional stories and so on. And so their knowledge being contradicted, and especially if they were in fact wrong, it would be a great shame upon that poet. Fiachna promises that he will make Mongan be civil. You know, you will barely even see the boy. It will be grand. Come on up. Come spend a year with me in my court in Ulster. So this is not a short visit either.
Yeah, that's not a short visit. I thought it was going to be like a weekend getaway. Never mind.
Nope. This is like a year-long visit. I mean, I guess at a time when traveling required a lot more effort, you're probably going to stick around for a little longer.
Yeah. I know that if you like went into like different territories as well, like you're basically like you've zero rights.
Except for
poets. Poets and
poets. Yeah, clerics. There must have been, I don't think it's recorded specifically in the legal text, but there must have been some kind of allowance for, say, merchants of some kinds.
Oh, actually, yeah, I never even thought of that.
Certainly there has to be, right? Or there maybe are certain times of year where people can cross, or I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting.
There's some practicalities that just don't make sense if you don't allow.
Yeah, welcome to the laws. They don't make any sense. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. But that's part of what makes them fun.
So fun.
So Becc finally begrudgingly agrees, okay, I'll come and visit, but you really better keep an eye on your boy there. Becc comes up, and while he is visiting, Fiachna decides to go on a royal circuit around Ulster and brings Becc with him. And so while they're going around, because Becc's job as an Ulsterman and as a poet is to know the Dinhenachus, to know the lore of all the places that they're visiting. And so as they're going through, some youths who are traveling with them, who do not include Mongan, I will say, Mongan's been left back at court.
Oh.
But some youths who they're traveling with, on 2 or 3 occasions, ask Becc, oh, hey, tell us about those standing stones over there, or hey, tell us about this, this hill. And Becc begins, oh, yes, he kind of hums and haws each time. He's like, oh, I'm pretty sure that this was built during the time of Corroy when, whatever.
It's like, that's my dad's house we're talking about.
But each time he does this, one of the youths pipes up with, no, that's not what it is, and then gives him the actual answer.
Oh, shit.
So more than once, this poet, even though he's an olive, even though he is the highest ranking poet, he fucks up. He makes all these mistakes in his knowledge, and he is shown to be wrong. So these various times that he's tested, and I think he's tested by different groups. Like, he's tested by youths who come with them. He's tested by, like, people they meet on their circuit, different groups. But he always has this sense that somehow Mongan is the one behind this.
Oh my God, this guy is so petty.
And so when...
Sorry.
Yeah, no, this is exactly it. But when he returns to the court, to add insult to injury, actually, each time Becc fails to answer one of these questions about the lore of the places they're traveling through correctly, Fiachna says something along the lines of, you won't be thought any of the less of, there.
Oh God.
Yeah, so it's like very...
Messing with a poet's pride, but messing with an olive's pride.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
in fairness, on Eka,
Yeah.
on his behalf, I would be absolutely snapping, right?
Yeah.
If my friend invites me to stay at his house and then drags me around Ireland, asking me to tell him fucking stories, I would
Yeah.
be snapping. But that's...
Yeah.
But also, like, your whole job
Yeah.
is Dinkianicus.
Yeah.
No
So
offense.
There's really, and I mean, he is an Ulsterman. It would be one thing if he was from another province, say, and
Yeah.
he was more familiar with
Or
the lore of
Wales
another
or
province.
something.
Yeah.
You know, like
But
that's...
that's not
You're
the
from
case
here. You're from
you
here.
don't have any excuse. So they return to the court of Ulster, and Echa goes after Mongan, even though he was home the whole time, about this series of shameful encounters. And Echa says, "Well, thou hast done that, Mongan, I know." And Mongan replies, "Thou hast said it." Per, a fairly old translation. I think this is a Whitley Stokes translation or something.
Oh.
But basically,
He's like, shut
Eka
up.
says, "I know you were behind this, Mongan," and Mongan says, "You're the one who said it, not me."
Oh, what, Mongan? This guy sucks. This guy's venomous sheep. He sucks. Sorry. I love this.
So Echa then satirizes Mongan, cursing him to have no legitimate heirs, hence no noble issue, which is where we get the title of the story from, nor to leave behind any great inheritance. And what's interesting about this is, I mentioned at the beginning, and you, as you said, you weren't familiar with Mongan, and he's a relatively unknown character, even though he's got some really great stories attached to him. And so maybe there's something to this curse having actually worked.
Oh,
because
shit.
Mongan is largely forgotten.
Yeah. Oh, Mongan.
Yeah.
Oh, now I feel hard. But satirizing someone, especially in Olive, like I had it written down somewhere.
And there's a lot more here too, because
There's
as
more.
we'll be talking
Sorry.
about, satire had a legal process behind it, and it doesn't seem like that process has been followed here.
No, it has not.
So Echa has really, really dug himself a hole in terms of his credentials, and yet the story doesn't really have any comeuppance for him, which is interesting.
Really, really interesting. And
Yeah.
that's also just big move to make.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the shame he experienced is comeuppance enough, but
Yeah. I'm just trying to think about satire laws. That's actually something I didn't really look, which is silly of me to not even look at. But I know there is like.
we'll be talking.
Oh yeah,
about
sorry,
it.
we'll get
no
there.
worries.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and back up a little bit here and just cover the basics now that we have one story, and we'll begin some other stories during this episode. But Saoirse, you know this one. What is the Irish term for a poet?
It's a filler.
Yes,
it's
it is
a
a
filler.
filler. And do you happen to recall what the root of the word
I
is?
do. Tyler actually taught me this in my Old Irish tutoring classes. So it means to see.
Yes.
And this is also a really fun thing. The substantive? No. Atá. What's that called?
Yeah. Atá, a substantive.
It's like it is.
Yeah.
The negative of that is ní fil or ní ill, right? Which doesn't mean it's not. It's not seen, which I just think is really fun.
Yeah.
And I just want to put that in there.
Yeah.
But sorry.
Yeah, no. That's perfect. So, in other words, a fila is a seer. So, there is not only this sense of a poet being someone who does poetry, but as we also mentioned, they are the keeper of lore, and also they have this prophetic ability. They are the highest ranking lay professional. Again, they class among the Nevydd. In a couple episodes ago, we talked about sort of the stratification of early Irish society and how we have the Nevydd class, then we have the various freemen, and we have the various dependent classes. These are among the highest ranking, not only of professions, but of the society as a whole. But unlike the other Nevydd class people, this is based on their occupation, not on birthright, though it does seem like frequently in practice, poetry tended to be an inherited profession. So a poet would pretty much always be attached to a lord or king who would be their patron, and the patron would give the poet a fee for their services, which included singing praise poems to their patron and about the patron and the patron's ancestors, acting as a lore keeper. Potentially, there was some sort of legal role they had too, because there's a lot of crossover and blurring of lines between poets and judges.
Yes. Yeah, I think my own personal opinion is I think that it was very much, I actually kind of, oh gosh, what are they called again? Breatnach? Breatnach? Yeah. I thought that was actually a part of the fili group. But I also could be wrong because I'm only small.
Yeah, well, in the law text, and we'll be getting to this in our next episode, I think. Or no, another couple episodes out when we look at some of the different professions. But brithas are classified kind of as their own separate independent profession. So they're a freeman, but they're not necessarily a nevydd if they're just a brithiv, and that's it. But there are so many stories and hints within some of the legal literature that poets have a function where they can almost perhaps serve as a brithiv, or they make what is called a judgment in the text. And so there is a great deal of uncertainty in terms of, did they actually have this role? Is this something that's mostly a legendary addition? Is it something where maybe they diverged over time and the poets used to do more of the judging role and then the brithiv became a specialized separate thing?
Maybe, actually, that would be very interesting. I actually always assumed that it was, obviously, I have a lacuna. Is that?
Yeah.
I have a lacuna in
One
this
of
kind
John's
of.
favorite words.
I love that word. I actually only discovered it like the other day as well. That's why I'm like, lacuna this, lacuna that.
Yeah.
But because you know how it's like if a tuath is complete, it needs a cleric, a poet, and a king. So I know the poet or the king enforces the law and has to know the law, but I thought maybe it's just from the literature that I've been doing that the poet has to kind of like fact check him. It's like he is the Dáil and the king is the president.
Yeah.
That's
my
opinion.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know how many of our listeners will know about the Irish government setup.
Sorry, lads.
The Dáil is, Congress, basically. Yeah, if you're from
Parliament.
the US or Parliament or
well, at the minute it's everyone's screaming, but that's.
Well, I mean, I think that's how the US and the UK are as well.
Oh, that's nice.
It's consistent across the board.
It's consistently. Not helping anybody. Thanks very much, lads.
Poets actually have 7 different grades, and we won't go through all of the different grades, but just to give an idea of what is associated with these, the lowest grade of poet, sort of the lowest level of qualification, and what this does for you in terms of how respected you are in society can be measured by 2 particular numbers that our law texts give us. One is, or 3 numbers, I suppose. One is how much that poet should be awarded as their prize for doing their work for the patron. Their honor price, which we talked about in a previous episode, which is basically a financial way to rank how important you were in society and was used as kind of the base for determining what payout you could expect in lots of different legal situations. And then also the number of compositions they were supposed to know. And so for the lowest grade of poet, you have a prize for your work is a dry heifer. Your honor price is 1.5 shades, and to remind people, a shade is worth half of a milk cow.
Oh.
So in other words, 3/4 of a milk cow. And your compositions, you should know 30 compositions. By the time you get to the rank of the olive, which is the 7th gradation, you have a prize worth a cart and a covel, which is a
female slave.
Yes, unfortunately. And also 10 cows. All of that is your prize. So that's a lot more than a dry heifer. Your honor price is 40 shades, or in other words, 20 milk cows. And to remind people, a king's honor price, the lowest rank of king, the king of a single tuath, was 7 covels, which is a couple is worth, do you know, Saoirse, how many milk cows?
It's like a wait, 3?
3. Yeah. At least according to the glosses, and we have to assume that these numbers actually fluctuated. But if a couple is worth 3 milk cows, kings had the king of a single tuath has an honor price of 7 covels, so in other words, 21 milk cows. So you can see 21 versus 20. That olive is barely any lower on the honor price scale than the king. So they're almost neck and neck with each other. And then the number of compositions they should know. So lowest grade, 30.
Oh, Jesus.
Highest grade, want to guess?
Oh, like 170?
Double that.
What?
350.
350.
Yep. So you had to be really good at memorizing if you were an olive.
Wow. Jesus.
Yeah. So, and I mean, it doesn't really scale, I would say, in a linear fashion. It's more of an exponential growth sort of curve, I'd say. So you jump a lot. When you get to an olive, just one grade below that has a prize of 5 cows, which is less than half of what the olive gets. Has a honor price of 20 shades, which is half of what the olive has, and has half as many compositions, 175.
I'd pick that one. 175.
Yeah, that sounds doable.
I could do that.
Yeah.
I think you're already there, though, with all the amount of stories you know.
Now, here's the catch. So remember when we were saying that poets aren't poets because of their birth, it's their profession, that's what determines their rank in society.
Yes.
But that it's frequently inherited.
Yes.
Well, while it is possible for people who are not in poet families to find a way to learn to be a poet, to get lucky and get the training they need and become a poet and gain that status, there is a caveat. Quote, if he be not the son of a poet, however, or a grandson, only half honor price goes to him.
Oh my God, so mean.
Yes. This is what the law text about the different gradations of poets has to say.
They hate status mobility. They really,
they really
despise status mobility.
Yeah. So you can have a lapse of one generation because it allows for a grandson. But otherwise, if you don't have a poet 2 generations back, sorry, you only get half as much.
Get out. We don't want you. We don't want you farmer.
You still get most of the benefits,
Yeah, that's actually so true. God, they're so... I love them, but Jesus, leave them alone.
Yeah. And to make things even more... this is already one of the most stratified individual classes with 7 different grades. I think that the writer, the carpenter, has 4 different grades, and the farmer basically has 3. So this is already a lot compared to most other professions. But there are also 3 quote-unquote subgrades of poets according to the Uraicecht na Ríar, which is the law text I'm using for this information. These subgrades are the Thavan, the Drishoch, and the Ovlera, which are translated respectively as the blockhead, the thorny bush, and the buffoon. And they may or may not be equivalent to a word that is a little hard to parse in the usage in Irish, but the word that we know in English as bard. And these guys are sort of pre-grade 1 poet. So
I was wondering when you were going to bring this up.
The blockhead has an honor price of half of a scruple. A scruple is worth a 24th of a milk cow. So they're worth
not even enough for a
48th of a milk cow.
Not enough for a burger, mate.
And they have 20 compositions. The Uraicecht na Ríar says he does not have knowledge of letters, in other words, of meter, and he assaults everyone with his recitations. These poets spew their brute mouthfuls on the chiefs of courts. Then the thorny bush. This guy, all of these guys are in the range of 1 to a half of a scrupple. So. But this guy has only 10 compositions, and, quote, he sticks in the face of all, or he comes out from a tuith to a poet to get to know meters. Which, this is...
He sticks what in the face of all? That's kind of... Hold on now.
Yeah. I mean, how my brain wants to interpret it is like he gets in everyone's business.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was going to go with that. Or
yeah, like he's up in your face all the time, as we would say in English idiom.
Or maybe he just kind of sticks in the face of all. He
gets on your nerves.
Maybe he's just a very uncharismatic, trainee poet.
Yeah. I mean, there is sort of a category of satire that is not considered dangerous, like real satire. That's more for entertainment. So maybe he's more like a kind of, someone who insults people all the time.
Well, that would make sense with thorny bush.
Yeah, that's and sticking in the face of could be
I suppose like your honor price.
Yeah. Oh, it's the price of your face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe he's just like going around like poking. Like not actually making satire. Oh, this is fun. But yeah, maybe he's not
I was thinking verbal barbs.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I'm thinking that as well. But like he's not making actual satire, but he's more like poking at your honor price. Should he really be Ériu? He only I don't even know if I'd call her a covel. So really, he only has 2 covels.
Right.
Because I've never seen her pick up any water. That way, you're kind of you're not really making satire.
Yeah.
That's fun. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I love that speculation because I think there's so little that we have about these particular categories that speculation is really what we have to do.
Me with my thesis, don't worry about it.
Yeah. No, this is great. And then the buffoon has only 5 compositions. Seems to have been something like a court jester. And so, yeah, there you go. The bards. There is a little bit of information about this sort of separate categorization of bards where it seems that they didn't necessarily have formal poetic training.
I was going to say, I think it was Binchy who argues that there was like one big poet school somewhere. Have you read this? Where was it?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, I didn't
Oddly enough, I know more about the later schools of poetry, like post-Norman, dissolution of the monasteries, than I do of the early stuff, and I mostly work on the early stuff, so I don't know how that happened.
I think this is where I got the poet judge thing kind of caught, because Binchy proposes that there is like a poetic law school somewhere around, I think, Tara, maybe he didn't say, but it's in Ériu, 1958, page 44 to 56, by the way, if anybody wants to read up on it and prove me wrong. But yeah, that the difference between a poet and a bard was formal training, which is also just kind of class distinction as well.
Yeah. So unlike the filith, which is the plural of fila, bards had no formal poetic training. The word bard goes back to continental Celtic.
Ooh.
We see Posidonius, who, writing I think in like the 2nd century, something like that, he records the 3 related types of people called the bardi, so the bards, the vates, and the druides. And so we can see bardi gives us bard, druides gives us druid. And then the vates, that one doesn't sound very similar, but it's cognate with a word in Old Irish, fáith, F-A-F-A-I-T-H, which means a prophet or seer.
Yeah.
And so...
God, linguistics is crazy.
Right? Right? So it seems to connect to fila in terms of the basic meaning of the word seems synonymous. Also, just for people who aren't familiar with the Irish language, the V sound and the F sound
they're not interchangeable, but they are kind of
one
grammatically
falls into the other in certain cases.
An awful lot. Yes, just if you're like, how did you get from V to F?
Yeah.
We do it all the time, babe. All the time.
We sure do. In fact, phonetically, they're almost the same sound. The only difference is whether or not you incorporate your voice box into it. So if you
have so many fun facts.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you were to pronounce the word feel versus veal, if you pay attention to how your mouth moves over the F versus the V, feel, and veal, you'll notice your lips, your mouth, everything moves exactly the same, but all you're doing is you're adding your voice box to get the V sound.
Feel, veal. Oh. It's crazy.
So there's a reason that eclipsis causes F to go to V in Irish, or nasalization, as we would say when we're talking about the older language. In any case, we've got this connection going all the way back to the continental Celts of bards being associated with something that a seer that becomes the fili in Ireland, and then also an association between those and druids, which are their own can of worms that we'll have to talk about at some point. But there's also druids in Ireland versus in Wales,
and then there's neo-pagans,
and then there's continental,
and then there's
there's a lot there.
Yeah, don't look on Pinterest.
I'm looking at Sears' face and just seeing the exhaustion.
Because here's the thing. I got into Celtic studies because I saw fun little things on Pinterest and TikTok, and I was like, yeah, let's do that. And then I went in and I studied it, and I'm now 6 years in, and I'm like, that was all absolute bullshit, okay? And now I'm living in Ireland, and we're bringing back so many of our like great traditions, and some of them are just bullshit. Like, and people keep being like, well, the Druids said this, and it's like, we know nothing about the Druids. Anyone trying to tell you they know more than a possibly maybe could have been, I don't know, is lying to you. They're lying to you. Sorry. Yeah. We can edit that out because I'm just tangent.
Well, I mean, I think that's okay because, I mean, when the word druid, at least as we translate it, comes up in Irish sources, it's pretty much being used in one of two ways. It's either being used anachronistically to talk about a pre-Celtic, or not pre-Celtic, pre-Christian religious figure, or it's being used basically to say wizard.
Yeah, wizard.
Spellcaster. And in fact, sometimes that's just how it's translated. Because, and I mean, that's what it means in modern Irish now. Dree,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Or Driecht for magic,
Yep.
Yep. God, language is fun.
Isn't it?
And also, like, I know, just, sorry to turn this into a druid thing,
please.
but it's just, like, a lot of the sources we have about that we have, any kind of depiction of druids that we have is actually from like a very very biased source, which is the Roman Empire. So like they talk a lot about French druids and like French kind of Celtic culture, but they also said that in Ireland, I can't remember the man's name, but also said that we used to fuck our mothers while eating our fathers.
Gerald Wales.
No, that wasn't it. This was a Roman guy.
Oh.
But I do love Gerald de Wales. I did a full dissertation on Gerald de Wales, and I still have more to say.
Gerald de Wales said fucking a horse.
Yeah, we were fucking a horse, we were fucking goats, we were fucking our sisters, we were fucking falcons, I think, at one stage. We're just everything. Yeah. Anything. Yeah. Not too far off. If anybody has been on the streets of Cork at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah.
I mean, we do have classical authors who really liked to say that the Irish were cannibals. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's a long-standing tradition.
Yes. Well, I've eaten things I shouldn't have eaten in this country. But yeah. Anyway, Druids, don't know that much about it. We have kind of not farcical, that's mean, but we have very biased depictions from very biased sources.
Yeah, and I will fully admit that a lot of the what's the word I want to use? The colorful depictions of druids that people have in their heads nowadays.
So
or that
fun.
People embrace. Much of that derives from those Celtic revival movements I was talking about earlier.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So we can put a lot of blame on them, but I'm actually into their bullshit.
Yeah, no, they're really fun. They're
so
really,
fun.
really fun. It's just not
but
historical fact.
yeah, a big part of my research is going to be looking at what those changes are that they make to the medieval sources. How how do they
feel like
adapt
they're really
it, and
Greco-
why were they adapting things the way they did?
I feel like they really Greco-Roman fight. Everything. Sorry.
Yeah.
Fill us.
Yeah.
Shit.
So another interesting, I suppose, and this ties back to the previous episode on kings just a tiny bit, is that we can see some quite different uses for this term fili versus bard in a couple of old terms that show up once in a while that combine the word for king with these two words and give us very different meanings. So the regula, which comes from re, meaning king, plus fili, is a word for the highest poetic status in Ireland, which was rarely given to anyone who was attached to royalty. This is purely a professional kind of poet, but it had to be a poet of national significance.
Ooh.
So you don't get these guys very often, but they're named basically. Literally, it would be king poet or poet king. But Ríar, from re plus bard, or barth, is a king who likes to dabble in poetry.
Oh.
Isn't that cute?
Oh, that's actually lovely.
Yeah.
He's learned to have a hobby.
But I think it kind of ties back well to those descriptions we have of, what were they, the blockhead, the thorny bush, and the buffoon, where they're more dabblers in poetry. They're not professionally trained in poetry. So I think dabbler is a good...
Dabbler is fantastic for
it's
that.
such a fun word, too.
It's also, it's great to say, but yeah, that's actually a fantastic way of putting it. He dabbles.
So...
Horny face or whatever.
Oh, wait until we get to the entertainers.
Oh, God.
Different episode.
What the fuck, you guys?
Yes, we're getting there. Let's talk a little bit now about the different categories of poetry again. We'll leave out elegies. It's kind of its own, as needed thing. But specifically, I want to look at praise poetry versus satire, and then something that kind of falls in between and has to do with the legal process behind satire. Praise poetry is fairly straightforward. The idea is that the patron will give their poet the prize that they're due in exchange for the poet composing and performing poems to praise the patron and praise his ancestors and thereby elevate his social standing. I mean, it doesn't actually increase your honor price, but really to maintain yourself as a king, to maintain yourself as a lord, there's a lot of things you have to do. Like, if you don't represent yourself in the status you're supposed to be in, you can actually lose your honor price. We talked about during the King's episode that if a king reduces himself by actually engaging in manual labor, for instance, that's something so below him that he'll lose his honor price as a result, and he won't be able to maintain his kingship. So he has to behave like a king. And one of the ways to behave like a king is to get poetry read out to you.
But bringing it back to the bar.
Yeah.
When the owner shows up to the pub,
yes,
you want the bartender to be like, "Oh my God, like, how are you?" And then you want to be like, then the bartender goes around like, "Oh, owner got you this drink," that goes to another person, "The owner got you this drink," then everybody's like, "Yeah, the owner's class. The owner's so nice. The bartenders love him. Like, he's giving us so much hospitality."
Yeah.
I'm on the ball with this.
You are so on the ball with this.
You can rob that for your classes. It is.
Brilliant.
So good.
Okay. Yes. No, that's exactly it.
I work in a bar, by the way. That's
we had a whole conversation about this yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Shout out to the old bear.
Yeah. Shout out to anyone else who works in a bar. So, praise poetry, fairly straightforward. All about inflating the ego. Satire, on the other hand, can be used for a number of reasons. But one of the more common reasons might be because the patron doesn't give the promised gifts that the poet is supposed to receive for his work. So in this example, the poet might be like, I didn't get my 5 cows and my cart and my covel that I'm owed.
Where's the slave lady? Where'd she go?
So the poet might choose to satirize their patron for failing to uphold their end of the bargain by, saying they're mean-spirited and... Hey, Tyler here. We lost some of the recording at this point, unfortunately. The system we're using basically resets to a new file every time it hits about 30 minutes of recording time. And during those transitions, it sometimes seemed to work, but sometimes it didn't, and little bits got missed or parts got repeated and bits got lost. So this was the main moment that caused a problem as far as the podcast goes. So just to make up for what you missed there, the effect of the satire in terms of legal rules was largely one of diminishing that person's status, taking away their honor price. And in the case of a king, for example, we saw when we looked at our Kings episode last time that a king who tolerates satire can't stay a king. That's something they're not allowed to do. So their honor price basically becomes nil, and as a result of that, they lose all their status, they lose all their power, they can't maintain their kingship. There also were believed to be magical effects that satire included, such as causing blemishes to rise upon the skin of the person being satirized. There is one last type that has to do with the process for satire, which is that you have to give notice to the person you intend to satirize. You can't just go up and satirize them, or it is considered an illegal satire, and then you yourself, as the poet, can get in trouble for that. So instead, you have to give notice, and of course, appropriately, you would give notice in the form of poetry. And this is a final category of poetry that we'll mention today, known as speckled poetry, because it has bits of satire and praise mixed in to balance out the satire, and this is how you give notice. And now back to the main recording. So the idea is you haven't yet given legal notice and followed the protocol, so you can't satirize just yet. But if you balance out your initial bit of satire with some praise at the same time so that they even each other out, that's okay. And so this is how you're going to formally announce, hey, I'm planning to do a full-blown satire on you. But also you're great, you're really cool, your ancestors are awesome, but also your feet stink, and you have, X many days before this becomes a real problem. So,
my petty poets.
Yes. Oh, they're so good. I love them. So this is the first step in the process where you give notice. And then after a waiting period, which hard to pin down, but it seems to have been several days, which is essentially time for whoever is being threatened with satire to make good on what they actually owe this poet. And if they don't, then the poet is legally allowed at this point to actually perform the satire, which, as we're saying, can have all these repercussions. It can have legal repercussions of lowering your status. It is believed to have magical repercussions of causing physical blemish,
or death,
illness, even death. And so, in general, just the threat of being satirized would frequently give the poet what they want. There is another catch, of course, because if poets were able to just go threatening satire willy-nilly for no good reason, that might make them a little too powerful.
Yeah.
So they do have to have a legitimate reason, or it doesn't count.
And then they would then probably lose their honor price because they're like, you're just raping the piss now.
Yeah, exactly. So we might compare it to modern libel laws even. Famously, Ireland has extremely stringent laws around this.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I was once threatened with somebody to take me to court for slander.
Oh,
because I called him a bollocks.
Amazing.
And he was like, that's slander. It's in front of the pub. But it's like, yeah, but you're being a bollocks. That's not my fault.
This is a legitimate reason.
He was like, no. You didn't pay for your pint. You're telling me you paid for the pint. I'm the only one here. You're saying it's the other bartender. Stop acting like a bollocks. Give me your money and take your pint. That's slander. I don't care. Oh, God. Sorry.
Yeah. No.
Maybe take that out. Who's going to find this?
Well, you didn't name names.
That's so true. Keep it in.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
Yeah.
Double down on the slander.
Yeah, exactly. There's much caution that takes place in the Irish media space because of this, which is why I'm glad that I mostly talk about dead people. I can slander them all I like. They're not going to do anything to me. Nearly murdered Saoirse there.
I loved that. That was brilliant. It's so true though. All we do is talk about dead people.
Yeah.
Or people that mightn't even have been there.
Yeah.
Like, and then
and half the time they're fictional. I mean, it's even better.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So the process, as we were saying, the poet gives notice of intention to satirize. There's this waiting period where the accused can make recompense. If the accused cannot act, satire is performed, and consequences result.
Dun dun dun.
Speaking of consequences, the Annals of Connacht in 1414, section 16, have the following to say. John Stanley, lieutenant of the King of England, came to Ireland this year to destroy the Gaels of Ireland. He was a man who granted no protection to cleric or layman, or to the poets of skill in every art on whom he laid hands and exposed them to colt and beggary. He plundered Niall, son of Aodh O'Higgin, in Ishnog of Meath, and Henry Dalton attacked the son of James Dewitt and the king's followers, and took from them a cow for each cow, and a horse for each horse, and a sheep for each sheep, and a pig for each pig, which Niall had lost, and gave them to the O'Higgin. They were then conveyed into Connacht. After this, the O'Higgin made lampoons, or in other words, satires, on John Stanley, and he lived only 5 weeks till he died from the venom of the lampoons. Now this was one of the two poets' miracles which were worked for Niall O'Higgin. So...
Yeah, that guy sucked.
Yeah, so...
Fair play to them.
Yeah. There is some historical, 100% watertight...
Watertight, absolutely no exaggeration there.
Historical evidence.
There,
satire,
right there, 100%.
Killing.
English fellas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you get for colonization, folks.
Yeah, watch out.
That's what you get
I'm
for
coming for
disrespecting
reparations.
poets.
For all of you.
Yeah. I have an example of a very short little piece of satire.
Give it to me.
This is from Roisin McLaughlin's early Irish satire. And I'll do the Irish first, and then I'll give the translation. Atad Shneda Connachlein Id Chorin, Atad Namila Kamer de Ilith O'Connell. There are nits with their offspring in your tonsure. The lice are in a frenzy to increase O'Connell.
That is nasty. Oh my god.
So apparently a satire against a cleric of some kind.
Oh yeah. Jesus.
Yeah, when you have a tonsure, you don't have that much hair, but there's all sorts of nits and lice up in there.
Still got fucking lice, boy.
Yeah, and they're in a
god.
frenzy to increase.
Oh my god. Whoever wrote that was dead on. That was nasty.
Oh, right.
That's
right.
I know there is one. I can't remember where it's from. I don't know the Irish, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was to a king. And it was like, you're as useful as a stick that at the end of it has badger shit on it. And it was Dr. Emmett Taylor read it out in class, and we were all sitting there like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Just also for a modern equivalent, there's a phrase that I haven't heard outside of the women in my family, but it's a face like a bulldog licking piss off a nettle is used sparingly but with great purpose. Because imagine a bulldog, do you know a nettle, like a stinging nettle?
Yeah.
Awful if you ever get one, but a face Like he just licked piss off of it. How descriptive, how wonderful.
Yes.
So maybe it's still alive, this satire thing.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Here, have you ever seen this phrase?
Or Hagen and meal to
Do you want to read it for the audience and tell them what it is? Because it just ties in so well.
Nor hagen na mealta tagen na sne. What's mealta?
Lice, I think.
And sne?
That is knit. So we have lice and knits again.
Lice and knits. Nor hagen na mealta hagen na sne.
So in English, the phrase is equated to the English idiom misfortune breeds misfortune, but the literal Irish is a little bit more colorful and talks about nits and lice breeding misfortune, I suppose.
Jesus.
And I mean, that's what's happening in Connell's culture.
Oh yeah, Jesus, poor Connell.
Poor Connell. Well, maybe Connell deserved it.
Yeah, maybe he definitely did. I know, but just the itch. Oh, I'm actually getting itchy thinking about it. Oh my god. Oh, why did I?
Well, I'll distract you from it. So, also in the realm of satire, but we get this little piece from a very well-known little story. Saoirse, we'll see if you recognize what the story might be. I'm just going to give the quote, and then you let me know if you might know where it comes from. She was reared by Conchover and grew into the loveliest woman in all of Ireland. She was kept in a place set apart so that no Ulsterman might see her until she was ready for Conchover's bed. No one was allowed in the enclosure but her foster father, foster mother, and Leverham, tall and crooked, a satirist who couldn't be kept out.
I know where this is from. This was in my notes. This is from the great love story of Deirdre and Nisha, which is a bit fucking sad, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think just a tiny bit boring. I think, but that's just me.
Yeah, no. I'm of the same opinion. Great love story in that everyone freaking knows it, and it has been retold and retold so many times. Like even just the medieval version.
Yeah.
There's so many.
And imagine going to a Gael school, which are like Irish speaking like primary schools, and every comic book, every year we do a drawing of it, we do a play of. I'm sick of Grania and Diarmid. At least it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
That's at least a little funny.
Yeah.
Because Fionn McCool is just a dickhead.
I'm a little worried that half of my thesis is going to be this story, because it is part of the Ulster cycle, and there's so many versions during the revival period too. So,
ooh. But it also brings up two very important things. One, you cannot keep not just a filla out, but a satirist. Yes. You are scared shitless of them, and it's even more freaky deaky because it's a woman.
Yes, exactly. And this character, Leverham, is really interesting in herself. She shows up, I mean, her name literally means tall, crooked. That's the two elements in there. But she shows up in quite a few of the Ulster cycle stories. She seems to reside in and around the main sort of royal site of Ulster, as it's known, Evan Macha or Navan Fort. And she's just kind of this consistent presence in the background a lot of times, and tends to, again, the theme of ominous background characters. She's an ominous background character. Yeah. She often seems to almost portend misfortune or strife forthcoming.
Girl.
But yes, exactly, this idea that you don't keep out the satirist because you don't mess with the satirist, but also being unnerved because she's a woman. And there's two things to mark about this in terms of sort of the early Irish society. One is that Leverham is pretty much never called a filla. She is called a satirist specifically, which could be from one of a couple of factors. This could be sort of misogyny rearing its ugly head, and we want to paint her in as negative a light as possible because she is a woman above her station. Or it could be because being just a satirist specifically is listed in the legal text as its own profession category that's separate from the fili that does it all.
Could I add a third thing in? So, gossip amongst women actually was legally, I cannot remember the name for it now, hopefully I will remember it in 2 seconds, but was legally protected in Irish laws.
Oh, that's what I did not know.
Yeah, oh my god, this is absolutely fascinating and fabulous. It became outlawed, I think, during Cromwell, I think, because he hated everything, he hated Christmas, but it was like legally protected. So this could also be linked back to misogyny, that it's not only is she a massive gossip, but she's gossiping out loud, and she's gossiping to not just women of confidence.
Oh, interesting.
And she's going outside of her rank.
Right. Oh, interesting. So she's kind of betraying that trust and that legal protection, but also because she has satire in her pocket, you don't want to mess with her and you don't want to call her out on it.
There could
definitely
that just
be
popped up
something
in my
there.
head and I was like,
yeah.
no.
Oh, that's really interesting.
I might as well say that for the internet. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, no.
If I'm wrong, it'll disappear in a couple of days anyway. So it's it's not like it's there forever.
Yeah,
it's okay.
yeah. And I mean, we're looking at things that centuries, oftentimes more than a millennium old. So we're gonna get some stuff wrong.
We're gonna get stuff wrong. But I'm still learning. I'm okay with that.
We're here for the crack. So there's this element of satirists having had their own separate category, though if you're just a satirist, you're not a full-blown fili, you are not given that same rank of neviv. You're an independent professional as a satirist, but you're not a noble. You're not one of the highest privileged class. The other piece here is that this does suggest or imply that women can take this role, and indeed that seems to be the case, that we can have women who are poets. Though it was relatively scarce, there is a suggestion that perhaps the most common way that you would see a woman becoming a poet is if you're in a family of poets and you don't have a suitable male heir to inherit the profession. So to kind of keep that 3-generation rule that we were talking about earlier in place of, if at least your grandfather isn't a poet, then you only have half as much honor price.
Yeah.
To kind of keep that from being interrupted. Let's say you don't have any sons, or you don't have any sons who are good at memorizing stuff.
Yeah. Sounds like shit.
Maybe it's time for maybe it's time for the daughter to step in. So that's one of the main theories for how you'd get your women poets showing up. Whatever the case might be, however they might have gotten this opportunity on those occasions that they do appear, it was a really unusual opportunity for an extremely high level of autonomy and status for a woman. We have the names of just a couple of women poets who seem to have been historical rather than legendary examples. The first one is Celtic, it's not even Irish, Udlia, or something like that. Uidlia, Continental Celtic is not my thing.
Oh my god, this is so fun. I have another female poet who has like an ul at the start. That's fun. Yeah.
Is it Ulach?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this Udlia.
Sorry for interrupting.
No worries. Is recorded on the tablet of Larzac, which is dated to about the 1st century BC.
It's crazy.
And her name is actually, again, linguistics is wild, so I'm not going to try explaining this over podcast format, but her name is cognate with the name Fethelm, which is a name that pops up a lot in the Ulster cycle as the name of a woman who is often portrayed as a poet or prophetess.
Yeah. That's mental.
Right?
I need a minute. What if what if it's not a name? What if it's like a title? Or maybe not. That might be a jump. That's a jump.
I don't know if it is, because, at least in the legendary literature, I can't speak to this woman from the 1st century BC, but
I can. I'm saying.
As far as Fedlm goes,
yeah, it's just a name. Sorry.
The character that she seems to embody in the Ulster Cycle tales, as far as I'm aware of, like 3 different Fedlms who may or may not be the same person.
What? I only know the one. I'm so left out.
There's one who shows up in the Táin, who at the very beginning, who foretells to Queen Medb of Connacht, Queen Maeve of Connacht, that her army is going to be bloodied to a pulp. And the Queen, of course, doesn't listen to her.
She goes, nah, don't think so.
There is also a character with the same name who shows up to Cullen at the Bruna Boina at Newgrange and says that she will appear naked before the Ulstermen to debilitate them, and this is one of the 2 different stories about the supernatural debility of the Ulstermen. Who knows? We never learn in the Táin what the debility of the Ulstermen is. We just know they're in their debility.
Oh wait, I thought it was
Macha's curse. That's a separate story, though.
And it's
explaining it, but there's nothing explicit in the Táin that says it's Macha's curse.
Oh.
The Táin just says they're in their debility, and it never explains what this is.
Shit. And it's also much later, isn't it?
I'm not sure about the relative dating, but my suspicion is that... No, I'm not going to even go into that right now.
Yeah, you know what? No.
I need to look at the dates. I know the dates more or less of the Táin, but as far as anyone can figure them out.
Yeah.
I had to go through a rabbit hole to figure that one out.
Oh, God.
But
that would be a PhD.
Yeah.
You could do 2 at once.
Yeah. Not the most focused of episodes, so that's okay.
Yeah, sorry.
We're having a good time. So we have this Fedlm who comes out of the sheath of Cruachan in the Táin. We have one who comes out of the sheath of Newgrange in Meath. And we have a woman by the name of Fedlm or Fedlmid Nicrathach, who is also mentioned in the Táin, who doesn't appear on screen. I think she appears in some other stories, who Cuchulainn says that he's going to a tryst with her handmaiden. But it seems like originally Cuchulainn was probably going to a tryst with this Fedlm character herself, and she is the mother of, she's the wife of Ériu, who is king of Tara, and a wife of Carbra Nia Fair, who is the king of Tara, and the mother with Carbra of Ériu, who is one of the main conspirators in the plot to kill Cuchulainn in Cuchulainn's death tale.
Oh.
So there's something about perhaps Cuchulainn having slept with Eric's mother that might be involved in the bitterness, but Cuchulainn also killed his dad.
What?
Yeah, he killed the Carbra. So
just for people at home, I cannot express how much I view Cuchulainn as this idiot jock who just goes around and he kills your dad, forgot that he killed your dad, then sleeps with his mom, and then is like, oh, I didn't think you'd mind, like, oh, why are you trying to kill me? I didn't mean it, like, dopey bollocks.
He's not the most progressive when it comes to women's rights and respecting women.
So funny.
Cheats on his wife on multiple occasions,
Kills your dad and sleeps with your mom. And then it's like, why are you fighting me, bro?
Yeah, we'll talk about him properly in the future. I've kind of tiptoed around getting Cuchulainn too much because the Ulster Cycle is basically a series in itself.
Yeah,
and I will have to go into that when I'm doing
it's like Game of Thrones
PhD nonsense. But yeah, it really is.
It's very much Game of Thrones core.
Yeah.
There's so much going on, so many different characters.
Yeah. So let's recap. We have talked about what a fili is or who the filith are. We have talked about how they are not only poets in the form we think of them in English in terms of actually composing poetry, which they do, and they do in forms of praise, elegy, satire, but they are also keepers of traditional lore, or Shenachas. They seem to have been involved in some legal stuff. We're not going to get into that too much right now. That's for another podcast. And we've also talked a little bit about the bards, who seem to have been untrained equivalent of a poet, a dabbler, as we decided was a good term for them. And to wrap us up, I'd like to look at another story. After our introductions began with a story about Mongan, I would like to end with a story about, this time, instead of a poet, about a poetess. So, let's talk about one of the Dinhenicus tales, and specifically the Dinhenicus of Shinnin. This particular story comes from the metrical Dinhenicus, so it is told in the form of a poem. I'm not going to read the poem itself, I'm going to sort of describe it. And there's a couple different versions. There's one called Shinnin 1 and one called Shinnin 2, at least as named by Gwyn, who is the editor and translator of the metrical Dinhenicus. So Shinnin is described in this poem as a renowned woman of the Tuatha De Danann, and she is skilled in many things, but one thing she lacks is something called imis, which is a term that shows up frequently in relation to poets and has this connotation of supernatural knowledge, a poetic talent, foreknowledge, magical knowledge. It's sort of knowledge that supersedes what someone should know, and it gives them the ability to prophesy and to speak really good poetry off the cuff, that sort of thing. And so she wants to acquire this imis, this magical knowledge and skill. And in order to do this, she travels under the sea to a place called Conla's Well, or the Well of Surgish. And this is a very paradoxical sort of image to try to hold in our minds of a well under the sea.
Yes.
So I personally like to picture it as sort of a bubble under the sea that you can go into, and you're not actually in the water, but the sea is like the sky above you, that sort of thing.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that's how I like to picture it. And it's not just a well. The well, and this might sound familiar in a minute here, is described as having 6 streams flowing out of it. So we've got these streams flowing out of the well, and there are 9 magical hazel trees surrounding it. And these hazel trees all leaf and flower and produce their nuts all in like a moment, and then the nuts fall into the tree, and it sort of goes through this cycle of this sort of growing, dropping their nuts, growing, dropping their nuts. And when these nuts fall into the well, they create these little, the juices of the nuts create these little bubbles. So there are salmon in the well who come and eat the nuts, and then these little bubbles from the juices of the nuts, these are what Shinnin is after.
Oh.
These are what contain this imis, at least according to the second version of the poem. This is the one that specifically includes the bubbles, which is why I like it. This is why I chose this one. They're very similar, but I like the bubbles.
You're so sweet, you know that?
Thank you.
I like the one with the bubbles.
Thank you. There are more reasons that I like the one with the bubbles, but that's for my conference paper this summer.
Woohoo!
Oh, yeah. When Shinnin reaches the well, and she goes in for these good bubbles with all the imis inside them, the well suddenly rises up and drowns her.
Oh.
And she becomes a 7th stream off the well.
Oh.
And becomes the river Shannon.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh my God, so many things connecting right now.
Oh, yes. So I think there's a lot of things we can talk about here, but seriously, what are you thinking about?
Well, the first are the 6 streams of water. That's biblical, isn't it?
It could well be.
I think it's either biblical or it's some creation lore. Lure. I say that as a Catholic. I'm allowed. But there is something to do with a spring. Is it 4? No, I think it is 6 or 7. And as well, the ever growing, ripening, dropping chestnuts, was it? That's from Fionnmacúil Salmon of Knowledge.
Yes.
That it was these chestnuts.
Yes, which the salmon eats.
Which the salmon eats, contain all the knowledge, which then, if anybody is not familiar with the Fionnmacúil guy, he's a bit of a dickhead, to be honest.
But is he as much of a dickhead as Chatháin?
You see, that's the Beowulf. Beowulf argument. What is it Dr. John Carey says? The Fianna are like the hound at your feet and the wolf in your field. Depending if they're on your side. Actually, Cú Chulainn sucks though. At least, although Fionnmacúil kept trying to get off with young women, and every this is also hilarious. Everyone in early medieval Ireland was like, "Stop, that's weird."
I guess at least the women thought Chatháin was hot for some reason, despite his 7 fingers
and his like 18 pupils and
his 7 or 14 or 8 or 16,
and he has every different hair color and every different,
and his 4 dimples on each cheek that are each different color.
Yes, and he grows extra arms and legs.
Sometimes he has 3 colors of hair.
Yeah, and he's terrified of boobs.
He really is.
He is. We need
maybe
to
all the men of Ulster are, according to that story we were talking about earlier.
See? I've known a couple Ulster fellas myself. I can stand that they are scared of boobs.
We aren't naming anyone in specific. You cannot call us out on libel or slander.
John Joe, this is satire. Do you hear me?
This is notice.
John Joe, this is notice. Sorry, John Joe. Yeah, so anyway, Salmon of Knowledge.
Like I feel like there's probably like four quote unquote medieval Irish stories that everyone learns in school in Ireland. There's the Salmon of Knowledge. There's how Chatháin gets his name.
Yes.
There's Patrick and the Shamrock.
Oh yeah.
And then there's Bridget and her cloak.
Yes. Oh yeah, Bridget and the Cloak. Yeah. Somebody made a reference to that the other. Doesn't matter. Those are like the main things everybody learns. And if you go to there's like special schools that have like everything is taught through the Irish language. You do like a bit more, but it's also really funny because growing up, we were taught like the Deirdre and Nisha story mixed in with Gráinne and Diarmid. So it was like a weird combination of both. But yeah, like the Fionnmacúil story, especially the Salmon of Knowledge, the story is that he's being like fostered off to this blind man who was also trying to get Imas, yeah. Yeah, he's trying to get Imas as well. He needs to know the secret. He's a poet, actually, I believe. And he is blind. Which was
his name is Finnegas or Finnegas. So he has the name Finn, which Finn McCovell or Fionnmacúil in the later language is not named this yet. His name is Demna at this point.
Really? I need to pay more attention to my classes.
That might not come through in all the variations.
That is funky. I didn't know that.
In the earliest version.
But OG Finn tells who will be Finn to catch this certain salmon. He's been trying to catch the salmon for years. Fionn catches it, and he's like, all right, what do we do? And he's like, cook it for me. Do not eat it. Do not touch it. Don't do anything. But as he's cooking the salmon over a fire, a blister comes up in the skin, so he goes to pop it, and it burns his thumb. And in order to like soothe himself, he put it in his mouth to cool it, but that there was flesh on it, so he got, every time he sucked his thumb, from then on he had all the knowledge in the world. Which, fun fact, I still do in exams as a good luck thing. So before everything starts, I sit and I put my thumb in my mouth, I'm like, I don't know.
So good.
This might help. I've been doing it since I was like 8 or 9.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, that's great.
I think I'm just a freak though, to be honest. I think I'm just weird.
That's okay.
Yeah, sure. Look. But yeah, that's so it's amazing that that's connected. And I know maybe it's not the River Shannon. There's another river in Ireland
that involves a well.
That involves a well and a woman, particularly a Sheed woman.
Boyne.
Yeah, but Boyne is being
Bowen. That's the name of the character.
Yeah.
So this was actually for long-time listeners. Actually, if this is your first episode, what are you doing? This is a serial podcast. Go back to the beginning. Sorry, it only took us 2 hours to get there. Sorry, satire.
Satire.
No. So it was probably our second episode even, or third episode, something like that. Early on our episode about Newgrange and the Bruna complex, when we were looking at those as kind of an important feature of the Neolithic period, and we were looking also, of course, at the legends associated with this site. The probably most famous tale about this site, coming from the mythological cycle, is how the Dagda, the good god, sort of one of the leaders of the Tuatha De Danann, comes to visit the sheath at Newgrange, at the Bruna Boina, and he there meets Bowen, who is the wife of the main inhabitant of the sheath, Elkvar, or Elkvara. And the Dagda gets the hots for Bowen. She is pretty into the Dagda too, so they send Elkvar off on a one-day errand, but the Dagda holds the sun in the sky in place for 9 months, so that Elkvar thinks it's still the same day, but he's actually gone for 9 months, which gives them time to get it on while Bowen's husband is away and to conceive. Oingus.
Oingus Oig.
Yeah, Oingus the Mako, get the young son. But there's sort of a epilogue to this in the Dinhenicus again, in the metrical Dinhenicus, in a poem called Bowen 2. There's also Bowen 1.
Who is making these names? These are class.
These are Gwyn's names, I think.
Go on, Gwyn.
But in Bowen 2 in particular, after these events have occurred, Bowen feels that she needs to cleanse herself, to purify herself because of her adultery. Mm-hmm. And so she goes to this well called the Well of Necton. When she gets to the well, it raises up and drowns her, and she becomes the River Boyne. So there's the same result of a woman drowning, but for quite different reasons. Also,
this is like another, just judgy Wells. Gerald of Wales.
Ah, yes.
He reported of a town, I believe, up in Ulster, which it's not Lough Derg. It's another one of the Great Lakes, or big lakes, I suppose they're not Great Lakes like they are in the States, that the whole town was like committing bestiality. And one day this well came up and drowned the whole town. And that's where you get one of the main lakes. Now, this is also Gerald of Wales that thinks we fuck everybody. Yeah. Not too far off. But everything, I don't know if you've ever been to Kerry, we don't know. But that's just another kind of thing. So, like, obviously he was listening. Yeah. Yeah, he was a bit of a freak, like, but he was listening.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Sure. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
No, that's great. Yeah, so we have so many of these very specific motifs that keep showing up in all these different tales, and the ones that are associated with poetry, in my opinion, are some of the most fascinating of this kind of little strange recurring theme.
There's also a thing with poetry about wave motifs.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So obviously the most kind of famous example is the Cailleach Beara. Which is the Hag of Bear. Great poem. Yep. It's basically this old woman. She was like, I am really, really old. The tide is going out. But when the tide was coming in and I was young, I was out there fucking. I was eating, I was drinking, time of my life. It's a fabulous poem. But hold on, I have something written down about this. This is a quote from Ní Chatháin in the Irish University Review, Spring-Summer 1992. For the poets, always considered that the place of poetic inspiration was on the brink of water and air. There's always kind of this renewing kind of like sea wave motif.
Yes.
And that can be very, just to tie in the poets with the rest of it. And then even just the poetess, like going underwater to then find yourself trapped in water.
Well, so, no, there's another, I'm glad you brought this in, because something that listeners to the podcast will have heard before is when we're talking in the first few episodes about the Lever Gabhla Éireann, the Book of Invasions or Book of the Takings of Ireland, and when the Sons of Meal come to Ireland and meet the Tuatha De Danann, the Tuatha De Danann say that they will only give over control of the land to the sons if Avergan, one of the leaders, gives a true judgment. And Avergan's judgment is that the sons will get on their ships and they will sail past 9 waves. And Avergan is a poet, by the way, this is important. They will sail past 9 waves, and then if they can manage to return to the land after that, Ireland should be theirs to control. So the De Danann agree to this, and the sons get on their ships. They sail past 9 waves, whatever that distance is. Theoretically, what's on the tin. So use your imagination for how far that is. Probably not that far.
Probably not that far. Unless it's big waves.
Yeah, I guess it depends on weather, really. But when they turn around to try to start coming back, the Tuatha De Danann use their magic to try to send winds and the elements against them to keep them from returning, to push them further out to sea. But the Sons of Meal, who, thanks largely to Avergan, have communed with the goddess Ériu, he sings a praise poem about Ireland and about the goddess, and it's implied that through her intervention, the spells of the Tuatha Dé fail to take hold or fail to affect the ship any further, and they are able to sail back, and Avergan's judgment therefore is proved true, and the Tuatha Dé are forced to give over sovereignty of Ireland to the Sons of Meal. So we have this motif of the 9 waves. This also shows up in a lot of more recent folklore. There was a podcast I was listening to recently. I can't remember. It was either the Blind Boy podcast, where he was interviewing Monckton McGann, or it was the Almanac of Ireland, which is hosted by Monckton McGann.
Yeah. He loves wave stuff as well.
He does, but he was talking about. I should say I'm 95% sure this is who it was. He was talking about this idea that the 9 waves motif has to do with the amount of land that is covered by water that used to not be covered before the Ice Age and before the flood raised of the melting ice raised sea levels. And so there's sort of this idea of land under wave that used to be dry land, and that's how far out you have to go to kind of reach that distance to where this used to be land, but now it's underwater.
Oh.
And so this gives, I like this idea because it gives this very, it ties into this idea of liminality that's always associated with the other world, but there truly used to be land here that people truly could have been walking upon, and now it is more something of the other world.
Yeah. How poetic.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect place to end this episode.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, good morning, dear.
Anna Foylte McQueen, good morning, Gachna Uraicecht. Thanks for listening to me ramble.
Thanks everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to Fabula Celtica. Please rate and review our podcast and share it with friends. You can follow us on the site formerly known as Twitter, on Instagram, or on Blue Sky at Fabula Celtica, or you can email us at fabulaceltica@gmail.com.
belly.
Nope, that's
no,
two Paddings.
You
No,
fucked up.
no. I fucked up bad. Season 1, Ancient Ireland. Episode 13. Title to be determined. Posidonius, who listeners may remember, we brought up Posidonius when we were looking at some of the descriptions of classical authors. Actually, no, maybe we didn't. I might be confusing this with what we did in my class this year because there's some overlap with the Ulster cycle, so that may be to come. I'm not going to bother to look back at the episode to find out, but the word Rigvard would be a Rigvarth? Probably Lenaiding.
I think, yeah.
Rigvarth.
We love our V sounds.
B also linates to the...
So does M.
Yeah. It's true. We do love the B sounds. But one of the more common reasons might be because the patron doesn't give the promised gifts that the poet is supposed to receive for his work. So in this example, the poet might be like, I didn't get my 5 cows and my cart and my covel that I'm owed.
Where's the slave lady? Where'd she go?
I've only got 15 and I really need more.
They're getting lonely. They need new friends. Come on. It's like dash hounds. Like you need. Sorry. Oh my god, horrible comparison. Women to dash hounds. Why not?
Well, I think it's in the spirit of what the early Irish would be saying themselves.
That's true.
Nichrathach or Nuichrathach, something like that. Yeah, it really is.
It's very much Game of Thrones score.
Yeah.
There's so much going on. So
Yeah.
many different characters.
Yeah.
Some have the same name.
I'm going to have a Saoirse live react to just let me load it really quick to this tab.
Oh no. Oh no.
This is my
Oh no.
this is my attempt to make sense for myself of the connections between characters in the Ulster cycle.
Oh, no.
Authentication here. Hold on.
Oh, authentication.
Add request. Okay, no, here, let's see. I haven't been on this tab in too long. There it goes. We got it. Okay, now I just need to zoom out so you can actually see the whole thing.
Oh no.
Okay.
Zooming out of a tab.
I'm trying to decide how I should display this to you. Okay. I think I know the answer. The answer is not zoomed out only to the point where you can actually make out what it is. Okay, that will have to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm scared.
So this is my attempt to chart connections between characters in the Ulster cycle.
Oh, there's more? Oh, I'm actually tearing up. Can I?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet mother of Jesus.
Now, to be fair, a lot of this over here, so everything outside of this box is sort of too early for the Ulster cycle stuff. It's like the inside of the box is the actual Ulster cycle, but most of those are High Kings of Tara, and I was trying to figure out how many High Kings of Tara are there during the Ulster cycle tales, because they seem to go through them pretty quickly.
They
do.
They do. Oh.
And this is a work in progress.
Work in progress.
There will be more to be added, I'm sure.
My darling boy. What are we going? Do you know what? At least someone has started it.
Yeah. Well, I think Emmett has a whole database of Ulster cycle
They
characters,
do.
but they don't have it in a nice visual format like
No,
this.
this
do
is nice,
they?
and this is also much easier to understand than going through like a big list. Because I remember Emmett telling me that they had like 7 or 8 different names.
Yeah. We're
for
talking
the
about
same.
Emmett, Dr. Emmett Taylor.
Yeah, one of fabulous person, and great scholar as well.
They're doing a postdoc in UCC currently.
Yeah, they are slaying it, if I may be so bold. But they're doing like this giant database where because they specialize in heroic tales, and so they were telling me about it one day. They literally listing everyone.
Yeah.
and then going, is it like how they died, what relationships they have, their allegiances.
I'm sure what texts they're in.
What text they're in, what
whatever,
manuscripts, what weapons they have.
Spelling variants.
This
is going to be so useful to me. They promised that I could borrow it once I started my PhD, which was going to make my life so much easier. Yeah.
Thank you, Emma Taylor. Yeah.
So, seriously, do you want to describe what you're seeing?
Okay, so I'm seeing roughly, I don't even know.
Basically, I've created a Lovecraftian monstrosity of a chart for myself.
It's beautiful.
It's
functional.
Yeah, it works for me.
It's handy.
Now I do have to make sure to return to it every once in a while, or I'll forget where things are, and then it will no longer be useful.
True.
So it's not quite at the user-friendly for other people level yet.
Poets.
That's going to be like a bonus episode that I'm going to cut out and move elsewhere.
Yes.
Or we're going to have like 30 minutes of bloopers.
The amount of editing you're going to have to do. I'm so sorry. I'm so ADHD.
No, it's good. I'm having a good time. That's what matters. Actually, we're nearly to the end of my notes I had for this, so we're in good shape.